You live, breathe, eat, sleep, and Street Fighter. Purposefully being a toxic villain in the Street Fighter community. I lied or something. I don't care, though. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I remember his dad had passed away, and I shot him a DM wishing him the best, saying, you know, sorry for your loss, something like that. Do I miss Street Fighter tournaments? Let me put it this way. When you're in the height of a competitive match and you're having a lot of fun, and it's going back and forth, and you win the first round, they win the second round, it's really great gameplay and it's close. There's nothing like it. And especially when you're doing that for an audience and the audience is really enjoying the level of skill that you're putting into it and the work that you've put in to get to that level, it's a really awesome feeling to compete like that.
And I'm actually really surprised to hear DSP say this, because it's not too often that he actually talk about the positives that come with having a competitive attitude in, well, anything. And this is yet another occurrence where I'm gonna have to agree with him. Competing can absolutely be an awesome experience. It can allow you to showcase your skill set and give you a reason to constantly improve and be better, something that at this point DSP is completely unfamiliar with and strives to never do. Again, that's why it's so strange to be hearing this from DSP. But of course, just like always, DSP is not going to be very agreeable for very long, because you can already feel that the next word out of his mouth is going to be a big juicy butt.
But the insane grind of doing that lifestyle is not something I would ever want to return to. I mean, there's a lot of travel, a lot of sitting around waiting for your turn, eating crappy foods because you can't eat good foods because you're rushing around to make sure you don't miss matches or to be somewhere on time. You know what I'm saying? Like, for me, that lifestyle was a decade of my life traveling to play Street Fighter, and I enjoyed the experiences I had. I met a ton of people I never would have met if it wasn't for Street Fighter. I traveled a bunch of places I never would have traveled. But it's the problem is the grindy lifestyle. You know, when I was younger, I could do it. I would be so, number one, I'd be annoyed because, for example, I've been to Las Vegas 3 times. No, there was the original Evo. There was Evo 2005, Evo 2006, Evo 2007. I've been to Las Vegas 4 times in my life, and I have never fucking actually stepped foot on the strip. Why? Because I'm an idiot, and I was so focused on Street Fighter competition and performance, I just stayed at the venue, and that was it. You understand how dumb that is? How insanely fucking stupid that was? But I was an insanely stupid person.
Wasn't the original question whether or not you missed going to tournaments? If you understand now that that was an incredibly stupid thing for you to do, then you could take advantage of the situation if you were to return to tournaments and actually visit the places that you have to go to? I don't know, it seems pretty straightforward, but yes, I absolutely do understand that it was stupid for you to travel to locations and not actually experience them because you were too busy playing video games. But as it stands right now, aren't you kind of doing the exact same thing minus the traveling part? You're not experiencing anything because you're too busy playing video games on stream. But just like everything with DSP, this is also just a self-inflicted problem. Nobody told DSP to exclusively play Street Fighter while he was in Vegas. I'm sure that there were many other people at that same exact tournament who actually went to the strip, who went to the casinos, who had a good time and actually experienced Vegas for what it is. It's entirely DSP's fault that he didn't do any of that, and it's also his fault that he wasn't invited to experience any of that with any of the other people who went to the tournament because they didn't like him. But when it comes to competition being a grind, DSP is once again correct. If you want to be the best at anything, you better be willing to put in the work. And it seems to be just about every time that DSP goes on one of these reminiscing segments, he gives us example after example of him not actually caring that much, of him not being dedicated to being the best, of him not being willing to put in the time that he needed to put in order to be as good as everybody else. And every time he talks about it, I'm just left wondering, why even compete if you're gonna half-ass it?
You know, that's what I mean. Like, and that's the lifestyle that you have to live. If you're going to be a Street Fighter player, you have to be tunnel vision, hyper focused, always playing, always focusing. That you live, breathe, eat, sleep, and Street Fighter. That's how you get good at it, right? When I remember Evo 2007, my last year that I competed, I went to all the different qualifiers again, and I qualified a ton of times again, and had all these different fucking spots. Okay, and I was practicing nonstop. When I went to Evo West, I went to Comic-Con for like 1 day. And outside of that, the entire other week, I was practicing with the Wolf Brothers to try to get better at the game, to level up. At Evo Finals that year in Vegas, literally the entire week, all I did was play fucking Super Turbo in hotel rooms. That was it. I mean, it's just such an insane grind of a lifestyle that I wouldn't want to go back to it. And it's expensive. You have expensive hotels, fucking travel and food and all of that shit.
And it's always so shocking to me how readily he tells people that he went to a bunch of different qualifiers and qualified for a bunch of different spots at EVO. Because it really just goes to show you that the one time DSP does actually put us all into something, he goes about it in the least efficient way possible. Brother, you already qualified one time, twice even. There's no reason to continue to go to all of these qualifiers and continue to qualify for more spots. I mean, you can only use one, so I'm kind of confused as to what the benefit is to having multiple. They just wound up getting given away anyway. Yet he uses this example of his own stupidity to try and justify why he's no longer interested in tournaments, instead of just saying because he doesn't care that much. And I can understand that when he went to these tournaments, he spent as much time as possible before the tourney actually started to try and get as good as possible. But you would think that any person with an IQ above room temperature that was actually interested in experiencing the city that they traveled to would just, stay a couple of days to actually go out and experience the town. But of course, this is DSP Space Gaming we're talking about, so you really can't be surprised that he didn't think ahead and actually plan something. Because despite his love for schedules, he doesn't actually plan for anything.
And then the bottom line is, when you go home, what do you have to show for it? Maybe today, because I'm a streamer, if I went and did well at a tournament, at least I'd be able to come back and my audience is welcoming me back and saying, thank you, it's a celebration that you did well or whatever. Back then, it was like not even worth it. Even if I did well, who gave a fuck? I literally qualified at like 5 EVO qualifiers one year. No one cared. No one gave a shit. I didn't win any money. No one cared. No one gave a fuck. So that's what I mean. Like, it's like such a grind for what? I didn't really get anything out of it. So.
And if that's how you felt about the entire experience, then you really had no business in competing anyway, DSP. If you were only in it for the money and the fame and your heart wasn't there to just be the best for the sense of competition, then get the hell out. This is a guy who's constantly going on about the grassroots of Street Fighter and setting up tournaments for the love of the game. Yet when he looks back at all of these memories he's made, all of these people he's met, and all of these tournaments that he went to, he says that it was all for naught because he didn't receive any money because nobody cared at the end of the day. Maybe somebody would have actually cared had DSP not been a huge piece of shit that everybody hated. Or should I say still hate, because their perception of him in the fighting game community never really changed.
Today it's also different, right? Like today it's also commercial and everything where you can basically get signed to a team and now it's like your job and you have a contract and you have sponsors and you have to be careful what you say. You don't want to upset the sponsorships and all of that. So you have to be very conservative in the way that you behave. And it's like the antithesis of what Street Fighter used to be. It really is. And I'm going to tell you right now, I know for a fact that when this documentary comes out about me later this year from Joon the King, I know that he delved back in time into the early Street Fighter days. He's probably got forum posts and fucking IRC chats and things that I did from 100 years ago. And you're going to see how I was basically purposefully being a toxic villain in the Street Fighter community. I saw myself as the heel of the Street Fighter community because it would build up hype for tournaments and things. Like it was done on purpose, right?
There's something really amusing to me about DSP talking about how he used to play a villain, how he used to see himself as the heel, as he currently wears an Akdolf Pigler style hat on a live stream. It's made all the better when you actually know what DSP does on a day-to-day basis and his constant behavior, because he's never really stopped playing that heel character. In fact, he's been playing this character for so long that I'm honestly convinced that it's not a character. I think that he genuinely is just an unlikable guy. He's got a bad attitude and nothing but bad things to say about everybody else all of the time. I think that he's using the idea of being a heel as kind of a cope for just being a piece of shit his entire life that nobody has enjoyed. But didn't he just talk about, at least a few minutes ago, how the downside to playing in all of those tournaments back in the day was that you got nothing out of it? But now he's saying that it's also a negative, that there's sponsorships involved and there's contracts and that it's more like a job and you have to watch what you say. Just proving that once again, there's really no winning with DSP. There's never a right answer. He's going to complain about everything all of the time, and there's nothing really anybody could do about it. Aside from point and laugh, of course.
Today I look back at that and I'm like, wow, that's really stupid. I would never do that. But that's how it was back then. Literally, Street Fighter was hype, rivalries, drama, like that. You wanted to build drama around a tournament so people would care about the fucking tournament, because no one cared about it because of money. No one cared about it because it wasn't being broadcast anywhere. So you had to build hype around it. So you have people showing up to the tournament just to see people play because of the drama and hype around it. You see what I'm saying? And that's what I used to do. But today it's like so different. You can't even do that, right? God forbid that you say something wrong, and then it'll be like, oh, well, now you're this offensive person. No sponsorships, no nothing for you, right? And that, you know, it's pretty ridiculous how things have changed, right? So I don't know.
I'm inclined to agree with DSP yet again. He doesn't know. He apparently doesn't know that you can build hype in a match without actually being negative at all. That you can build interest through sheer competition and people wanting to see who is actually the best. Not saying that drama and rivalry doesn't build interest, obviously it does. But that was clearly behavior that wasn't appreciated by anybody else in the community, and you need look no further than all of those SRK forum posts. Nobody had anything positive to say about DSP. He didn't walk away with any friends at the end of the day. And to this day, nobody has anything positive to say about him from the community. Meanwhile, everybody else from that era of the FGC is either still in the FGC or pretty highly regarded by everybody else. It's almost as if DSP went about everything the wrong way, which really just speaks for his entire life, doesn't it?
The Wolf Brothers. WOLFE, I believe their names, how you spell their last name. The Wolf Brothers. Graham Wolf and... shit, I forgot the other brother's name. But they were both really cool guys. They were incredibly good at Street Fighter at the time. But that's what I mean. Like, when this documentary comes out, right? They're going to be like, oh, so here's this heinous thing Phil said. Here's the shit he talked. Here's threats he made. Yeah, that's what it was like back then. Like, that's what it was like in the community back then. It was common. It was a common thing. We were all acting like stupid heels on the internet to try to talk shit to each other to get people excited for Street Fighter. That was the idea.
But that's just a misrepresentation of the facts, because nobody acted like DSP did. Those forum posts are still up. You can still see all of the things that they had to say as well as DSP. Nobody, and I mean nobody, behaved the way that he did on those forums. Nobody talked the way he talked. Nobody made the posts that he made. Nobody did anything like DSP. So he can continue to cope all he wants and retcon the history in his head, but ALT has already done a fantastic job in the Dent C scrolls, going back through and looking at a bunch of those old forum posts for the history's sake.
But today, when you look at it in modern context, in modern Street Fighter, you'd be like, oh my god, can you imagine if someone today was a shit talker like this? It was threatening and doing f***ed up stuff. No, because no one does that today. The entire community's changed. When money and business came into it, everything got whitewashed, right? So everything now is completely different. Back then, you had to do that to even get people interested in the events, you know?
You know, I don't think that I can be convinced that it was ever a good thing that you had to threaten people and do messed up things in order to get people interested in your matches. But even if that were the case, why does he not see it as better now that you don't have to do that? Why doesn't he see it as a positive? And why would he want this community that he claims that he used to love and absolutely adore to continue on this way and continue to be violent and off-putting to the wider audience? That's definitely not a great way for a community to grow. It's just gotta be a difficult sell trying to get somebody interested in joining the Street Fighter community, the FGC if you will, when they're violent and doing messed up things apparently. I just hope that the messed up things that they're doing don't include posting on the girls only SRK forums an incel style manifesto.
Yes, I already told you guys I'm going to react to the documentary when it comes out. From what I'm to understand, the documentary is going to be more than 4 hours long. So I'm probably not going to react to the whole thing. I'm probably going to react to the parts that I find more interesting, like about my history, my early days as a YouTuber, anything about the nonsensical stuff about modern day, about fucking money and accusations that I'm a racist and fucking WWE champions nonsense. I'm not going to entertain any of that. There's no point. I've already said my piece about it. I have nothing different to say about it. I've already talked about it till I'm blue in the face. I'm not even going to give it more attention, okay? But the other things about me and my past and all that stuff, I probably can give unique context to all of that and explain a lot about that maybe there's no information on the internet about it, but I can tell you stories and stuff. So that's the stuff that I feel like is going to be the interesting stuff to react to. So
And I know that this isn't the first time that he's talked about this. He said multiple times by now that he's not actually going to be watching any of the documentary that's interesting. Instead, he's only going to be watching the bits where there's no actual refutable proof so that he can just spin yarns and tell stories so that people believe him. Which obviously is just the lamest thing possible. But it really just goes to show you that he has no way of defending himself against all of the things that people claim he is or that they claim he's done. The only thing that he has is his word, which is absolutely meaningless to everybody on the internet, especially given how much he's lied in the past.
So there you go. All right. So I'm probably going to cover like the whole first, 2/3 of the damn thing. I don't know if we'll go to the end. 4 hours must be a lot of filler. No, I mean, you're talking about someone who's going to go through my entire life history. They're going to cover early days of me being in the Street Fighter community and all of that. Early days of me getting interested in YouTube and being a YouTuber. How things were much different back then, right? How I found my initial success on YouTube. It's probably going to cover the big controversies about Blip TV and the awful joke that I made that got me kicked off Blip TV and all of that drama from the early days. Then me actually coming to prominence on YouTube, getting signed with Machinima. The early days there, all copyright issues, money issues, all of that shit. Me moving across the country, getting into a relationship, how that caused a lot of problems for me in my personal and public life. The swatting, right? All the hateful groups that rose up against me in like 2014, 2015 and started the whole movement of this is how you don't play and all the negative shit about me on the internet. Then all the years of me persevering through that, kind of having this change of content and philosophy in 2017, meeting my now wife, how things got to harassment with haters and things around that time period with that and shit like that. Oh, the fucking escort saga. You know what I'm saying? Like, we keep going. Just me in my head going through my history. 4 hours is like an abridged version for sure. You know what I'm saying? Like, each story is just so crazy. And it's crazy thing after crazy thing that's actually happened to me, right? So I think it's going to be fascinating.
And for any normal person, listing off all of those things the way that he just did, that would be very telling. But for DSP, it was Tuesday, or I guess Wednesday in this case, despite wearing the M. Bison hat, if you're willing to call it that. And as this Joon the King documentary continues to get closer and closer, you see DSP more and more frequently setting up his narrative. He's already not going to be watching the entire thing, so he doesn't have to address anything that he doesn't want to. He's already made up a bunch of pre-assembled excuses for a bunch of things that he thinks are going to be addressed in the doc. And you'll see here shortly that there were parts of his past that he either misremembers or doesn't remember at all, and instead of trying to corroborate a story and actually figure out what happened, he just throws his hands up.
And yes, I do have some input on it. From time to time, Joon asked me some questions about stuff, and I would give him my side of the story. And he's like, sometimes he'd be like, that makes sense in context. And other times he'd be like, well, I actually have information that contradicts what you're saying. And I'd be like, I'm just telling you from my recollections, this is what I remember, Like I said, one perfect example of this that I know that's going to happen, okay? I guess there's a situation where originally my first PC that I had bought was from the two guys who had also made me my website at the time for free. But then they charged me for the PC, and the PC was bunked, like things weren't working. The PC showed up damaged. And I guess there was drama around that. So he was like, Joon was like, asked me questions about it. He's like, so what was the cost of the PC? What was this? I was like, I don't remember. I could tell you what I think it was, but I don't have receipts for anything. You're asking me a question about something that happened like 12, 13 years ago. I don't remember, nor do I care. I haven't given thought to this in like 10 years. And then he'd be like, well, what you said is, it doesn't jive with the facts that I found out. And I was like, okay, I don't care. I know this will be a big deal in the documentary that that I lied or something. I don't care though. Like, it doesn't matter. It's something from so old in the past. Who gives two fucks about this?
So it doesn't matter that he lied in the past, you guys, because that was in the past. That was years ago. Who still cares? Well, it turns out that a lot of people actually care. A lot of people care about the integrity of your character. Who would have thought that on the internet, a place that never forgets, that people will care about your past and will hold you to the character that you have? And how weird is it that when somebody tells DSP, hey, I have evidence that states otherwise. I have evidence that states that you are not telling the truth, that you're misremembering misremembering or that you're outright lying, that his first response is, well, I don't care, it was in the past. Not, oh, I would like to see this evidence, oh, I would like to hear from this person who says otherwise, because I don't think that I'm misremembering, I believe that I'm telling you the truth, but if that's not the truth, I would like to know. No, none of that. DSP, like I said, just throws his hands up in the air and says that it doesn't matter. Nobody cares about your past actions, I guess. Unless you're another famous streamer that DSP doesn't like, in which case he's constantly going to bring up all of your faults all of the time and act as though they matter more than anything you're currently doing.
But that'll probably be more like a juicy thing, right? Like, oh, Phil says this, but this is really what happened. I have the facts. I have the receipts from so-and-so who made the PC 13 years ago. I don't care. You know, it's such bullshit, water under the bridge from 100 years ago, from someone who I don't talk about or to. You know, I don't even remember their name. Like, why do I care, right? No, I remember what happened with the situation was there was a big falling out because the PC showed up and it was definitely not what I had been told it was. Like, stuff was misinstalled, there was damage to it, and I was upset about it. And I talked about it publicly. And at the time, I didn't realize that if I talked about it publicly, that would sick people on the people who made the PC, and it did. So now they're getting group harassed by my fans, which that wasn't my intention, but that's what happened. So now it blows up to be a big thing because I'm dumb and irresponsible, and I don't realize that that's something that shouldn't be talked about publicly because then people are going to get attacked for it. And then it ends up being something bigger than it should have been.
How did you not understand that this was something that probably shouldn't have been talked about publicly? Addressing these things privately is just the proper thing to do. If you have an issue with a job that somebody's done, if you have an issue with something that anybody has done, you go up to them personally and talk to them about it. Maybe the situation could have been rectified. Maybe you could have been provided information that would have solved the problem on your end. But in typical DSP fashion, he immediately started to lash out and lambaste these people who probably didn't even deserve it. From my understanding of the situation, there wasn't any damage done to the PC, and the only thing that was misinstalled was one of the tri-channel RAM sticks was installed in the wrong slot. Any imbecile or child can reinstall a stick of RAM, it's not complicated at all. But of course, the damage to the relationship was already done. DSP had already said very negative things about these people who had honestly done him a favor. So you can just add that to the list of bridges that DSP burned as quickly as he built them.
And then what ended up happening was, like, years later, the fan site, like, I had a falling out with the guys, and I still wanted the website for myself. Well, they owned it. They owned the domain. They owned the site. They had been running this fan site for years for free, and they said, well, if you want it, you got to pay us for it. I was like, wait, what? You made the fan site for me, and now you're going to make me pay for it? And they were like, yeah, pay us for it. I was like, well, whatever. And I did. I paid them for it, and I ended up getting it, you know, from them. But, I mean, it basically was a bad situation, and from what I'm to understand, for, like, years, one of those guys, like, really didn't like me and would say negative things about me in videos and shit. And that's one of the beginnings of the movement, that people didn't like me. You know, that's one of the early origins of it. It probably was one of the earlier times when people turned against me. Because before then, people hadn't turned against me. They actually liked me. Overall, I was more known as more of a positive guy on the internet, or had a positive vibe associated with me. And that was one of the first times people say, oh, the community's turning against Phil for his behaviors, you know? And now it's like, in retrospect, I wish that I didn't act like that. I should have just kept it all behind the wraps and never said a public word about it, because look what happened, right? But I didn't realize that back then because I was ignorant, right?
Ignorant to what? How interactions between people work? Ignorant to common decency? And please keep in mind that at this point in time, DSP was in his mid-20s. This was not a teenager. This was not a young adult who just didn't understand how he was behaving in the world. This is somebody who was in their mid-20s, living on their own, being responsible and making adult decisions. Yet he didn't understand that it was a bit of a faux pas to talk negatively about somebody that you had dealings with publicly.
Lord X Law says, will you ever tell us about Jaha? People keep spreading misinformation. Don't you think that's going to be in the documentary? I almost guarantee you that it will be. But it's just going to be a bunch of misconstrued stories about it. I'll tell you the absolute full story about it when we react to the documentary and it's in there. I know it's going to be in there. I'll tell you exactly 100%. Because that's 100% on me. And again, that was me back then being a asshole in the Street Fighter community. And people didn't like me for very good reason. Like, today I look back at that and I'm ashamed of how I behaved, And I kind of agree with the people who didn't like me back then, because today I'm not that person. I could see how stupid I was back then. And I agree that, you know, that I deserve to get my ass beat.
But you just said in this very segment that everybody was behaving in this manner. Everybody was being an asshole. Everybody was threatening and doing messed up things. So why did they single you out? Why was it an issue when you did it? These two statements just don't add up, DSP. Was everybody doing it, or was it just you and you deserve to have your ass beat? You also just said in this very segment that you're not going to be talking about anything in the documentary that you've already addressed, because you've already addressed them and you don't have anything additional to say. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you've also already told everybody what happened with Jaha. You've told that story. So unless you have some sort of changes to add, unless you have some sort of details that you've forgotten to include before, I don't know why you would be looking to retell this story.
We're going to get to it. I told you, I will be as transparent and honest as I can be about all the things from my past, as I always usually am, right? When it's pertinent, when we're reacting to the documentary. There's no point in bringing up insanely old stories on a random unrelated stream, right? At the same time, there's some things I'm not going to touch. Like I said, anything to do financially with things in the last like 4 or 5 years that is no one's fucking business, and it's all this insane speculation and nonsense from people who don't like me trying to say harmful things and shit. I'm not going to even touch that. There's no point. It doesn't affect anything. It has nothing to do with anyone. And quite frankly, it just pokes the hornet's nest again. You know what I'm saying? So we've stayed out of that drama, and that's what I'm not going to address. So once we, probably it'll be like, I think like the first 3 hours of the documentary will all be okay to react to, and then I might be skipping most of the end of it until we get to maybe like the last year, like maybe the side scrollers interview and onward. Maybe I'd go to that, and that's where we would pick up or something like that.
So once again, just getting confirmation that he's going to be skipping the more interesting parts of the documentary. All of the questions left unanswered that people have are going to be in those segments that DSP doesn't want to address. And obviously, the only reason he doesn't want to address them is because he doesn't have any sort of proof to back up any of his claims. I'm just curious as to why he would pick back up at the side scrollers. Does he think that that's a slam dunk case for him? Does he really want to rehash the side scrollers drama as if they ever actually did any wrong to him? Because trying to retcon the side scrollers interview as anything other than what it actually was, which is a completely fair interview on side scrollers' behalf, is Olympic level mental gymnastics that I don't think that anyone would be able to actually comprehend other than the guy. Tangentially related, just a few moments later, DSP was asked about the quartering, and I thought it was kind of peculiar, so I left it in. Let's take a look.
No, I don't talk with the quartering. No, sir. I literally haven't had a conversation with the quartering, an actual conversation, since the interview. That's it. Yeah. Once in a blue moon, you know, you shoot a DM just to say, hey, I hope you're doing well, or something like that. You know, like I remember his dad had passed away, and I shot him a DM wishing him the best, saying, you know, sorry for your loss, something like that. That's about it. I don't talk to the guy. No.
He doesn't talk to the guy, except for all of those times that he's apparently messaged him. Make that make sense. I'm just curious now as to how many people DSP interacted with on the internet and just happens to every so often message still. Like I said, I thought that DSP's admittance to messaging the quartering here was just a little peculiar given how scared he is of everybody else on the internet. I mean, the guy is literally afraid of playing public matches in video games because he's scared of trolls, yet he's still messaging the quartering. Kind of strange, but I guess that's what happens when you give DSP a softball interview, which I guess just confirms that he is not sending these types of messages to the side scrollers, because that interview was anything but a softball. But that's going to be the end of the video for today, but not before we take a look at some of the comments from the last one. So obviously it's big ups to the 60 skulls. Jarrett Mark says, leave it to the guy to yell at somebody for bringing up his personal life and then talking about that aspect of his life for the next 20 minutes. Not only did he talk about it for the next 20 minutes, but he also gave far more details than anybody had any business of knowing, and it was completely unprompted, really. So much for wanting to keep your personal and professional life separate, I guess. 713 says, the amount of trash that is in Phil's house is only rivaled by the amount of trash he puts on the internet, lol. Great video, dude. The gout line caught me off guard when we watched it live, lol. And I'm not sure whether that speaks more for the quantity of videos that he's put out on the internet that aren't worth this shit, or if it speaks more about the amount of garbage that is piling up in his house that he just refuses to take care of. But regardless of what the true answer is, I'm just happy that you enjoyed the video, boss. Big ups. And Line Caught Avocado says, the don't drink your physical pain away comment is almost cartoonish. I didn't realize this was a thing real humans considered. More evidence fill might not be a human style. And I'm right there with you. Never once have I been in any sort of pain, physical or mental, in which I thought that drinking away the pain was an applicable thing to do. But I guess that just means that I don't have the mind of an alcoholic, but DSP very clearly does. And he continues to suffer from these addictions to this very day. If it were anybody other than DSP, it would honestly be sad, but because it is DSP, I can't feel bad at all. The dude deserves everything he gets. Speaking of getting something though, you guys getting a thank you from me for watching the video, especially if you made it this far. Hopefully I'll catch all of you guys in the next video, but until then, make sure that you check out other detractor channels and dive deeper into that. Snortex.
Offensive person